Low network. Oh no.
Hello.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Caroline Stevens, Seeking the Truth, and I've got Greg Hallett. We're looking at part 6. We've been talking about the state of the House of Lords off air, and this could be an opportune time for Greg to give us his perspective on the current situation. So without further ado, could we be looking at Brino, further integration with the European Union? Over to you, Greg.
Thanks for putting in it. So I'm going to come up with an excuse first. You rang up earlier on today and asked for an interview. So I've been doing graphics all day. Actually, I've been doing logo graphics like this. So
Right. So what's that all about then?
Oh, that's my new watermark. My watermark. So just getting it all together, you know. So it's a G and an H and the shin and the 777. And
what are you going to do with that logo then? Are you going to put it on your new letterhead?
Well, I've got a press, so I'm impressing it in my paper. It's my embosser, right? And then it'll form my wax seal and a stamp as well. So we've just been working on that, and that took precedence over saving the United Kingdom.
No.
For today, and then you rang up and said, "Can we do an interview?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I had some dinners, threw some paper up, had a good read of Scotland's future, a plan hidden in plain sight. DTD UK Article 61 Constitution, 14 September 2017. It's brilliant. Have you read it?
No, but I did see it flash up on Facebook. So does this mean we could end up by separating from Scotland?
Well, and there's another one, I believe it's them as well. It's The Divide and Conquer of a Constitutional Union and the Solution, Scotland, the Betrayed PDF, a research publication for constitutional activism in Scotland. And that's also brilliant. And I've just got these just before dinner. So I've laid one up in InDesign, and I've got a few things highlighted out of that. And I'm reading through the next one, which is about 60 pages. And they've laid it all up. They've said it all 2 years ago on what's going to happen, and it is happening. And it's worse than we think. But it also absolutely ties in with my story that I'm the King of England, and Elizabeth has never, ever been the Queen, and she is continually abdicating as much as she can. She's also abdicating to me, but she's just plain abdicating all the time. So I've just been researching this document here. I've just got to finish the affidavit. It's about 100 pages, and it's on the various ways that Queen Elizabeth's royal styles and titles are a flat lie. They are fake and fraudulent and a connivance, fraud and forgery. And what we're looking at is a fake monarch who has never, ever, ever been the Queen, and she was stripped of all of her royal styles and titles, the real ones and the colour of law ones, on the 26th of March 1953, and then on Coronation Day she was just reinstated with her colour of law styles. So no real styles and no real titles and no colour of law titles, just colour of law styles. And what was really crowned on the 2nd of June 1953 was silent weapons for quiet wars.
But why did it take so many of the lords to wake up in 1996? From 1953 to 1996, what happened in those intervening years?
Rip Van Winkle.
What you mean?
Well, he slept for a long time, didn't he? Fell asleep for decades.
Oh, right.
We had ennui. We had massive ennui as an entire population right through the 70s. Most people were in a state of ennui. And it's like listlessness and what am I going to do? And especially Sundays, it was chronic. And people were undirectional, and they weren't talking in specific languages. So talking a kind of, if we looked at the way our parents spoke, they were kind of talking in repeat phrases, and those phrases were actually often really inappropriate and even harmful, but they spoke in those phrases to save themselves from thinking. Plus, everyone was drunk from the end of World War II to 1987.
Right. So, to put things in context, I was at the Tory Party conference on Monday. I mean, I was on the fringe. I mean, I'm not a Tory Party member, and I would never have spent that sort of money anyway. But you can go to these fringe events free of charge. So I went to one for Veterans for Britain, and they had this professor there. And I raised the subject about Lord James of Blackheath and his statement in the House of Lords on the 6th of September. And I mean, I've got it filmed that this professor was absolutely astounded that Lord James of Blackheath should even attempt to tackle a monarchy situation. So the way we're talking and the people who are watching, we are ahead of the game. But to actually talk to people outside our bubble, if you like, they think we're mad.
Well, most people are in a state of drunkenness or asleep or ennui. They really aren't awake at all. And then there's a few people who are awake and they're severely compromised, and they are sabotaging anyone who's actually telling the truth. And just before the interview, you told me that you were getting stalked.
Yes, yes, yes. And by the way, I've had number 10 Downing Street actually subscribe to my YouTube channel. So that's quite amazing.
That's fantastic. When did that happen?
Saturday evening, after I did 4 videos back to back about the Sandhurst Treaty, the Marrakesh Declaration, the Constitution, you know, the EU Constitution, all that stuff that really hit the fan, shall we say?
Yeah, good. Well, what we're looking at, what's attempting to take place with the EU now is, I'll just go back a bit. There's a theory that the Germans won World War II, and they did that by having nuclear submarines surround North America, and then North America instructed England to give up. And the way the Bank of International Settlements works is the winner of the war pays the loser of the war their war debts. So no one wants to win the war, right?
Ah, I get you.
Yeah. So Germany actually won the war, but they didn't want to be advertised as winning the war. So they said to Churchill, you say that you've won the war, fake Hitler's death, and then we will hide in Antarctica and Spain and South America, but Hitler was in Spain, not Argentina or Paraguay. And then Britain can pay Germany's World War II war debt. So straight after World War II, Germany started to thrive, and Britain was in food stamps until about 1965. Yeah. So that kind of fits. And then I think that may have had a time limit on it from 1945 to say 2015, let's say, which would be 70 years, 60 years, 70 years, exactly 70 years, which is a period of bankruptcy. So then what I think happened is all of a sudden, after 70 years, Germany was allowed to take over the United Kingdom, right? And that's being done through the European Union. And Elizabeth II, who's never been the Queen, and at best is a Suffolk's Queen with colour of law styles and no titles, and no real titles and no real styles, she is purportedly of German descent and is very happy about giving the United Kingdom to Germany, as she considers it a win because she has a foot in both camps. And her husband is German, and Prince Philip has been touted as being Deutscher Verteidigungsdienst.
I thought it was Greek.
No, German, right? So he's saying, so he wants to give the United Kingdom to Germany on the basis that he is Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, but there's a better way of saying that, and it's silent weapons for quiet wars. So on the 2nd of June 1953, it wasn't Elizabeth that was crowned, it was Prince Philip, because the coronation day was of silent weapons for quiet wars, and the leader of one of the leaders, the front man for silent weapons for quiet wars, which is all secret, the most public front man you see is Prince Philip, and he wants to give England to Germany to finish off.
Wow.
You
I
get
tell
it?
you something, whilst I'm going to slightly digress here. At the conference on Monday, I went to a meeting in the evening and Jacob Rees-Mogg was speaking. And he said there are only 2 Christian monarchs in the world. These were his words, and he said one was the Queen and the other one was the Pope.
Oh, that guy, he's so far off track. Jacob Rees-Mogg, on the 24th of July 2019, he was made Lord President of the Council, of the Privy Council.
Yes.
And the Privy Council so he's sworn the oath of the Privy Council, which is to let anything against the Queen, which means condemn anything against the Queen. Right. So he's acting in treason, trying to hide the public knowledge that Elizabeth has committed treason by signing many, many European treaties to give the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland, or of Northern Ireland, to the European Union. And if you look at Elizabeth's titles, she is not the Queen of England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland or
So what are her titles then?
well, I'm just going to read them to you. I'm just trying to get rid of my mail because it's making noise. I thought I'd turned it off. So her titles are Elizabeth II, or Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of her other realms and territories, Queen, comma, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. Now, so it reads Elizabeth II, comma, by the grace of God. Now, grace of God is defined as no deeds.
Right.
Right, so it reads Elizabeth II, by no deeds of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of her other realms and territories, Queen. There's no comma after territories. So it is by no deeds of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and her other realms and territories, Queen. Head of the Commonwealth. Right, comma, head of the Commonwealth. So they're saying she's head of the Commonwealth, but the Commonwealth hasn't existed since the 1st of July 1959. Right? Defender of the faith. And she's not a defender of the faith at all. The Anglican Church has gone down to 0 and more people working in the church than attending. Right? So you get 12 people in a ceremony and you get 3 people in the audience. You know, and 6 of those 3 people are trying to keep warm.
Yes, okay, that's true.
Well, so what we're looking at is Queen is right on the end, right? Which means Suffolk, which means she's a Suffolk's Queen, which means that she is delinquent, which means that she is either bankrupt or illegitimate. We know that she's not bankrupt, therefore she's illegitimate. Now, a true royal styles and titles. So this is a confirmation that she has no real royal style or titles, and it's confirmation that she has no real titles. And what this is colour of law style. Right? If she's really the Queen and she was legitimate and was not bankrupt, it would read Queen Elizabeth II of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, of the land and of the people and of the air, and the protector of all the resources of all things British. You know, it would be something like that. It'd be quite a positive. People go, yeah, you know, they'd stand behind it. But you can't stand behind that because it's if you actually read it according to the Chicago Manual of Style and the Oxford Dictionary, the Oxford Styles Manual, if you read the entire document, the entire document has a colon here, and a colon here, and a colon here, and a colon there. And every time you've got a colon, what comes after is a subclause. So her raw styles and titles are actually a subclause of a subclause of a subclause, which means it's a moot point, not to be considered at law. Right? You can argue it, you can discuss it, but it's irrelevant what you come up with. And then her first line of her titles is inset, and the whole paragraph is inset, and it's in speech marks, and that means it's a quote of a quote of a quote, which means it's hearsay. So Elizabeth's raw styles and titles are a moot point hearsay, and even then she is a suffix queen, right? So that means that Elizabeth only has colour of law styles, not real titles, not real styles, not colour of law titles, just colour of law styles. We call her the Queen. There's nothing that says she's the Queen. We call her the Queen of England. There's nothing in her titles that says she's the Queen of England. There's nothing in her titles that says that she is the Queen of the people of England. What she is that she's the Queen of dolphins and swans, right? The Queen, because, you know, the 3 mile limit, she's got ownership of all the dolphins within 3 miles of the UK. Did you know that? Probably don't want to. It's completely irrelevant. Don't get carried away.
Why did they give her that title then?
Because she's a fake. Right.
So why did that? We still don't know why the Lords woke up in '96.
Oh yeah, I told you. I absolutely told you. Didn't you get it? Okay, I'll tell you again.
So they were sleeping. You said they were sleeping.
Yeah.
And then they woke up.
Yeah. What happened was my co-author, Francisco Manuel, he opened the chest full of royal marks that Queen Victoria gave us in 1850. And that showed that they were the true royal family. And then word got out, and then 2 things happened. And they were opened in February 1996, and in July 1996, there was a meeting in Marbella in Spain with Prince Charles, and Prince Charles was dethroned and stripped of all titles by his peers.
Really?
Yeah, and that was called.
Who were his peers then?
That was called the Soiree of Puddles, right? And it was written up in a Freemason magazine called Journal, right? And I was written up as the Lord Chancellor.
Why was he removed of all his bits and bobs?
Because the woman who ran it was a Duchess of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, protected by the Russians, and lives around Marbella. And she invited Princess Diana, King Juan Carlos of Spain, and they had a child together called Prince William of England, and Prince Charles, and a lot of others. And so they got the big table, and everyone's dressed up. Diana's dressed up to the nines. And she stands up and she says, "Prince Charles, you are nothing." Right? And Prince Charles goes like this. Just puts his head down the whole time. Right? And he's thoroughly stripped. This went on for quite some time. He was thoroughly stripped of everything. So all of his peers could see that Prince Charles had no legal standing and no blood standing, and that his mother was illegitimate, and that his great-grandfather was illegitimate, and his great-great-grandfather was illegitimate.
Wow. So basically, King Juan Carlos of Spain, was he married at the time?
Yeah, he was married, but it was a rebound relationship. King Juan Carlos of Spain was actually in love with a tennis player model, and she left King Juan Carlos of Spain for my co-author, Francisco, and that broke the King of Spain's heart, King Juan Carlos of Spain's heart. He wasn't the king then; he was just the prince.
Right.
I think her name was Charmaine, yeah. So that was kind of interesting. So when King Juan Carlos of Spain booked a hotel in Portugal to stay at for 2 days, he books it up for the whole week. So he's got a few days either side, and his guards were guarding it a couple of days before King Juan Carlos arrived. And Francisco stood on the cliff overlooking the hotel. And the King Juan Carlos of Spain's guards are standing there with machine guns, and the back windows of the flash cars open, and it's all hot in that because it's in the Algarve. And they look up and they see Francisco, and they realise that King Juan Carlos of Spain's love of his life left him for Francisco. So he's got their machine guns, threw them in the back of the window, in the back seat, and then drove off. King Juan Carlos of Spain never turned up to the hotel. All of the bills were paid for the hotel.
Right. But he got it together with Princess Diana.
Who? Oh, yeah. They had four. King Juan Carlos of Spain and Princess Diana had 4 affairs. 3 of them are known about, and they're all published in Hello magazine in Spain.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's like everyone knows. Everyone knows. Like photos. And there's one classic photo where they're on King Juan Carlos of Spain's yacht, which is a big launch that I think Albania gave him to him to help with Albanian tourism. And he's there with Diana looking really cozy, and Prince Charles is there with a broken arm, just looking like the gooseberry, right? So the first relationship, which wasn't known about, was when Queen Elizabeth II, I'll call her Queen Elizabeth II, but at best she's really Elizabeth II, Suffolk's queen, colour of law style only, and queen of no area, no people, no land. Prince Charles is the royal runt, right? He's the royal runt. That means no one's allowed to breed from him, right? That's the rules with the royal runt. And all royalty, that's as the royal runt, no one's allowed to breed with him, and the wife is everyone's allowed to cuckold him, right? So everyone's allowed to have an affair with the wife, and everyone will turn a blind eye, right? And so Elizabeth II instructed Diana not to breed with Charles, because there's no way they could have anyone looking like Charles in the royal family.
You're winding me up.
No, serious. They usually kill them. They used to kill them. Like Nixa, Tsarevich Nixa was actually killed. He was the heir. He was actually killed by his younger brother and father.
Yeah.
And then the younger brother became Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and actually also married his elder brother's fiancée widow. They weren't married, so it was not really a widow. And then Tsar Alexander II also sired King George V of England.
So why didn't Diana and Juan Carlos get it together for good then?
Well, Juan Carlos was married, but he's married to his rebound, right? And Juan Carlos had about 15,000 lovers.
15,000 lovers?
Yeah, he's got the record. The previous record was George IV. He had 7,000 lovers.
Right, so there's Diana and 14,999 then?
No, she's probably about 5,000. It went on for quite some years. You know, she conceived the child with King Juan Carlos. She conceived Prince William on my 20th birthday, 15 September 1981. So it's all a cult, right? So Elizabeth has been abdicating to me all the time. So she said, well, we've got to give the true king a mark. So she instructed Diana to have an affair with Carlos and get pregnant with William and conceive the child on this day, right? 15 September 1981. And then she did the same with James Hewitt, and Diana gave birth to Prince Harry on my 23rd birthday.
So James Hewitt was the father of her second child?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But he was a washout though, wasn't he? James Hewitt.
What do you mean the washout? No, they made him a washout here. Plenty of money. Went to Spain, started up a bar. It failed, and then returned to England with nout.
So he was a washout then,
Well, by
by
design,
their standards.
by design, by design. You know, by interference, and that's what the British royal family do. They specialise in blacklisting.
Right. So did they force him to get impoverished then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So he won't be, James Hewitt won't be giving media interviews on the basis that he can still eat.
What about Burrell, Diana's whatever he was? You know, he looked after her, didn't he? What happened to him in the end?
He's a rampant homosexual.
But he was married, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's cover marriage. So quite a lot of British military and British high ups, so-called honourables, have cover marriages.
Well, a lot of MPs seem to have these fake marriages as well.
Oh yes, yes. Yep, that's true. It's quite hard to find some truth in UK politics. It really is. Like Jacob Rees-Mogg is just, I'll call him Jacob Rees-Mogg, like bringing the clouds back, bringing the mist back, covering everything up. He did he wrote a book on, apparently wrote a book, probably ghostwritten, on Queen Victoria, and he managed to get everything wrong. It's fantastic. How can
Well,
you get?
he's the guy that said there were two Christian monarchs in the world, the
He's a dick.
Queen and the Pope.
He's a dick. Well, for a start, the Pope hasn't been a monarch since 1963. So I'm born. Let's say this is true, right? I'm born, and I'm marked as Hamashiach by my birth date, right? And they go, okay, we've got to remove our crown now. So the Pope goes in 1963. He goes, popes are no longer princes of Europe, and we are no longer wearing the crown. In fact, we're going to give them away. So they gave one to Canada, gave one to America. It's giving them away. They don't wear the crowns anymore. The popes are not princes of Europe. And there is no title Pope. On the list of the Pope's titles, not one of them is Pope, right? Pope is a colour of law style that is foisted on them because all of their other titles are so complicated. At best, they are a Bishop of Rome.
But he's supposed to be the Black Pope, isn't it? Is he not supposed to be the last Pope?
That's tragic, isn't it? It's so tragic. None of it's real. We're living in a non-reality. We're living in absolute non-reality. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is a giant twat. He gets everything wrong. He is Jacob Rees-Mogg, right? He covers up everything with clouds of grey bullshit. That's all he is, right? He's Lord President of the Council. He's sworn an oath to someone he knows is not the Queen, and he's sworn an oath to let or condemn, L-E-T-T, condemn anything against the Queen who is not a Queen, right? And she is barely a Christian. She's a Catholic, right? And the Pope is not a prince. So he's saying we've got two Christian monarchs in the world, Elizabeth and the Pope. We have no Christian monarchs in the world.
At all.
No, exactly.
Actually, that's something that we've never really considered. The fact that in the world there are no Christian monarchs. What happened? Who else is a royal family? Haven't they got one in the Netherlands?
Oh, they're a giant fraud, the Dutch family. Dutch royal family is another giant fraud. Hilarious. In 1909, Queen Juliana's getting born, right? But she is born with Down syndrome, right? Now, and the palace is a long driveway, about 100 yards long, and the people at the gatehouse in the farm, kind of the gatehouse, but it's the farmhouse in front of the driveway to the palace, they had a child at the same time that didn't have Down syndrome. So they swapped the babies.
Really?
Right? Yeah, and that became Queen Juliana, who's the mother of Queen Beatrice, right? So so I go to Holland and I'm doing some research there and I'm staying there and um, so I'm only allowed there 3 months, but I'm there 15 months. And after about 11 months or so, an immigration officer comes and sits next to me in the bar. She's about, I don't know, 31, blonde, good looking like the Dutch girls, that golden skin, and they're all fit because they're on their bicycles all the time. And she's sitting down next to me, not chatting me up whatsoever. And she says, "How come you're here so long?" And I said, what I was doing. I was researching some books on royalty, and I've got some titles. And she said, well, what are your titles? So I rattled off my titles like Arch Treasurer, Guardian of the Royal Secret, Lord Chancellor of the Duchy of Saxe Coburg and Gotha, Lord Chancellor of the Principality of Hanover, Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of England, Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of Scotland, Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of Northern Ireland. And she goes, "I believe you. And by the way, do you realize that it's a crime in Holland to pretend you have titles when they're not real?" And I said, yes, I do. Right. So that's the Friday. And then she goes and informs her bosses, and she's in immigration, and the bosses inform Queen Beatrix. And then on the Monday, Queen Beatrix announces that she's going to abdicate.
What, after the conversation you had on the Friday? Why have you had an impact in that department then?
Because they realise that my titles are true and that she is the daughter of an illegitimate farm girl.
Yeah.
So Beatrix abdicated. Now, I did the same thing in Spain, Portugal, and King Juan Carlos abdicated.
Is he still with his wife then, King Juan Carlos?
Very much doubt it. It was just a rebound relationship. They don't really get on. And Queen Sophia is actually from a bigamous line of illegitimates.
So do they have children together or not?
Yeah, she's a bobblehead as well, bobblehead. Skinny body, big round head. It's called bobbleheads. The car, you got a dog. The bobbleheads? You know what a bobblehead is, don't you?
No.
Bobblehead. Okay, you got a back windscreen of your car, you got like a dog, right? And when you're driving along, the head moves up and down.
Oh, yeah.
That's called a bobblehead. And especially when you got a wide head, right? You got a skinny body and a wide head.
Yes.
So it really bobbles around, yeah? Yeah. Well, sometimes you got skinny, small people with big, wide heads, and it appears that they're bobbling around. That's called a bobblehead, right? And Queen Sophia was an illegitimate bobblehead.
So why did he marry her?
It was a rebound. It was just a rebound after his girlfriend, Charmaine, I think it was, left Juan Carlos for my co-author, Francisco. Cheers to that. Good one, Francisco. Yes. Hey.
Right. So back to, what about the Privy Council?
The Privy Council has 701 members, and a lot of them are heroin traffickers.
Mandelson's there, isn't he?
It is a list of protected mafia. Winston Peters is on the list. He's the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand. He's a heroin trafficker, and he used to follow me around when I was growing up to the age of like 18. We moved twice, right? And he used to follow me around. So when I was born and raised around Warkworth, there was a harbour there, and they used to bring drugs in there, like heroin and giant bags of cannabis, army sacks full of cannabis. Then I moved to Auckland, and he moved to Auckland. Then I moved to Tauranga, and he moved to Tauranga. And when I was just turned 15, I watched this pallet. You know what a pallet is?
Yeah.
Timber, right? And they had like black, like jerry cans, painted black, and the other ones painted dark blue. And they were attached. The pallet was like broken up a bit, and they were attached to the pallet, and they're thrown off the port side door of a ship, starboard side front door of a ship. It's about well, it's about 2 meters by 1.5 meters wide.
Yeah.
Right? And then they went out in a Parker Craft dinghy, which is like an aluminium dinghy, with two guys on the shore. Well, actually, two guys and another two halfway out, and then two guys on the boat on the Parker Craft. And they went and got the drugs. And then because we had high tide there, we had the sand went out for 330 yards, and it only dropped a foot in 330 yards, right?
Yeah.
So they had to get out of the Parker Craft and drag the Parker Craft and the pallet full of drugs for 300 meters, right? Two guys in diving suits and another two guys helping to drag the Parker Craft, and another two guys with the like a Land Rover with an open back to it, and a trailer. And so they took the heroin up to Winston Peters' place, who was about 400 yards from me. And Winston Peters was, he had the head of the Mr. Asia heroin trafficking syndicate staying with him, who was a Queen's Counsel lawyer, who was Prince Philip's agent in New Zealand. And that was Peter Williams. And they shared the same legal offices together. So you had Winston Peters and Peter Williams, right? So if you put one of the names backwards, it's virtually the same name.
Confusing.
Designed confusion. And so that was the heroin. And the partner, Peter Williams, was Prince Philip's agent in New Zealand. Prince Philip was the main heroin trafficker in the world. And Peter Williams ended up becoming the president of the Law Society, right? And Winston Peters was questioned by the police over the two most famous murders in New Zealand, which was Harvey and Jeanette Crew. And I just had a thought. I'm just going to see if I can get something up. I want to see what data.
It's been a busy boy, hasn't he?
Yeah. So basically, when it was 17th of June 1970, around then, right, it was a murder, so we discovered a few days later. So Winston Peters was heroin trafficking in a partnership with the main heroin trafficker, Peter Williams, and now Winston Peters is the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Right, okay. So didn't we have a false flag in New Zealand?
Yeah, and a Privy Councillor. Yeah, we had a false flag in New Zealand by New Zealand's hermaphrodite Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who actually financed it. She gave $5.5 million to Hillary Clinton to do the Christchurch Mosque massacre false flag. And there's that Bible quote, "And the dead shall rise."
Yeah.
That means a false flag, right? So you had all these Muslims lying down with stage blood squibs. And they'd lie down, they'd be dead, and someone would be filming them dead, right? And then the camera would pan around, and then they'd get up and walk around behind the cameraman, and then the cameraman would come around again, and you'd see the dead person lying back down into position.
Yeah, I saw, but apparently you're not allowed to share that footage, are you?
I've done 3 videos on it. It's on 153.net. Yeah, I did 3 videos on it with Dr. Jim Fetzer, emeritus professor, currently being sued for $1 million for telling the truth about Sandy Hook.
Does this mean you could actually be put away? You could be sent to prison?
No.
Right, okay. It's supposed to be on the dark web, though, isn't it?
Oh, it's not really that dark. It's just that I'm not under their jurisdiction, and they haven't made a complaint, and I've told the truth, and I've even used their own documents. Not only that, it's like I had the army go in and question the hospitals on the girl who was injured. She was about, I don't know, 4 years old, and she was in for gunshot wounds, and she was released that night, right? Yeah, and then she was also released the following morning, yeah, and she was taken up supposedly from Christchurch to the emergency children's ward at Auckland Hospital, and she never arrived. And then when they brought Prince William, who's, you know, as thick as two short planks, and they brought him out to New Zealand for a photo op with this girl who was suffering from the gunshot wounds that didn't happen. So they wrapped some bandages around her, stuck her back in hospital, and said, "Look how good she is at recovery. Isn't that fantastic?"
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a giant fraud. It's just such a fraud, right? And the supposed guy who rescued her, he raised $30,000 from donations the next day, and he wasn't even there. He was in his hairdresser's about 4 miles away cutting his hair when it happened, and he went, "Oh, I'm in on this."
So he didn't rescue her at all then?
He wasn't even there. He supposedly got shot. He wasn't even shot, right? And he, when this guy first got interviewed, he was he had no bloodshot around his eyes, right? And it didn't look convincing that he was wounded or anything. So the next interview, he's got a pair of glasses, and I noticed that the glasses that he was wearing were actually the glasses of the interviewer, because later on, earlier, they showed a photo of the interviewer, and she was wearing the same glasses. So I took the glasses off and photoshopped them and matched them exactly, right? It's just a giant fraud, man. Like, New Zealanders are really dumb people. The Kiwis, right? Keen interest without intelligence. Kiwi. Keen interest without intelligence. Yeah. And people in Christchurch are actually the dumbest people in New Zealand, right? So that's just like...
Christchurch is a really nice place, though, isn't it? It's like Little England.
Yeah, it is like Little England, or it was, until it got invaded by Islamics wanting free money and free housing and never have to work again on the basis that they've been persecuted. But there were no deaths, and there were blood squibs everywhere, and you could even see the tubes for the blood squibs, right? And when they said someone shot through the window, we measured the weatherboards and measured the height of the windows, and the guy was actually sitting against the inside wall, so the guy would have to come in through the window, a little gap in the window, and then shoot down at 90 degrees at a 45-degree angle, right? To hard right, 45-degree angle to shoot this one guy who was wounded. And that person would have to be 10 feet tall to make that shot, right? And the accused shooter was about 5'4".
So was he taken to prison then? Did they have
he pleaded not
a suspect?
The shooter, Brenton Harrison Tarrant, he pleaded not guilty because no one had actually died and there were no death certificates, right? So what they do, because all these socialists in power, what they have in common is no reality, right? There's no reality amongst them at all, just zero reality. So
Yeah.
what they'd done 2 years prior is they said, "Oh, there's a lot of people missing. We've got to change the coroner's certification for death certificate, and we'll change it to if a friend or relative photographs that person's clothes, that is evidence that they are dead."
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's not sort of sensible, is it really? Right then. So what we're going to do with the Queen?
Well, she's been advocating, but she's also been advocating to me through the royal styles and titles, through the coins, and by scratching the Elizabeth Mary's Hallett painting in the National Gallery in room 34, the Gainsborough painting. I think it was done in 1777. She's been advocating me a lot. She had to come to New Zealand to advocate to me in 1981. So on the 14th of October 1981, she was visiting the Otago Museum in Dunedin, and Brenton Harrison Tarrant shot at her from an upstairs window, like one floor up across the street, from about 45 yards. He shot at her at least 3 times.
Right.
So why? To remind Elizabeth that she had to abdicate to me. And then they brought her to Auckland 2 days later, on the 16th of October 1981. And this was all codified. So the motorway had just been built from Wellesley Street, Simon Street, Wellesley Street, to Mount Wellington. And the architecture school where I was studying was on the corner of Simon Street and Wellesley Street. So they were driving from the Duke of Wellington to Arthur Wellesley Street, right? Arthur Wellesley became the Duke of Wellington, won the Battle of Waterloo, which created the gay and bankrupted the British royal family, which gave the Rothschilds the right to breed the British royals, right? So the Rothschilds were the sperm donors for the British royal family from 1815, right? So this was an undoing. They had to drive from Mount Wellington to Arthur Wellesley Street, yeah, which is where the architecture school was and where I was studying. So we got, someone came in and said, oh, the Queen's coming. So if you stand outside on the last bit of the motorway where all the traffic's slowing down, you can see her, right? So we go out about 11:45, and it's an hour and a half before she arrived, right? And then students were all about 20, 21, and so I was about 20. So she eventually comes out, and there's no road barrier between the incoming, outgoing lanes. So the limousine comes over, and all the people sitting on the motorway barrier fall over laughing like in a concertina fashion. And then I'm left standing there, and the limousine comes up about 5 yards from me, and the Queen's going like this, right? And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. And then I started to get briefed by intelligence, and one of the intelligence people was the Queen Mother's bodyguard, right? And so he comes to me and comes over to my place in October 2006. It's 25 years later. And he says, oh, I guess I can tell you this now. I guess I can tell you. Queen Elizabeth II was shot at outside the Otago Museum in Dunedin by Christopher John Lewis. You know, he's a bit of a nutter.
But it sounds a bit extreme to send a message, though.
There's more. And then he says, well, the whole affair was actually put under a D notice for 25 years, and that's why I'm here now on, the
2006 or something.
17th of October 2006, like 25 years plus a day. And he said the whole thing was put under a D notice for 25 years, and it wasn't because of the shooting. It was because Queen Elizabeth II was given the worst case of diarrhea ever, right? She's given the trot something bad. And it was the president of the National Party, which was the incumbent party at the time, George Chapman, who came up with the idea of a red noddy post office van, right, with a toilet in the back, right, following the limousine, right? So the royal limousine is followed by a red noddy post office van, you know, this short car, red, with a high roof on it, you know, the stupid looking van.
Well, on that note...
Well, there's more.
This is toilet humour.
So what they did is they closed down the motorway, both sides, so there's just no traffic going all the way from Auckland City to Mount Wellington at all. So it's 3 lanes each way. And then Elizabeth was an hour and a half late because at least 6 times she had to stop the limousine, get out, and go back into the red noddy post office van and wipe her own bottom. And then after that went on for an hour and a half, she then had to wave to me, right? And that was how they put her in a place.
Okay, on that note then, Craig, I look forward to interviewing you again.
There's more. That night, there was a Royal Variety performance at the St James Theatre, which is about 500 metres from where the architecture school is. And Prince Philip turned up, but Queen Elizabeth didn't, which was confirmation of the diarrhea. So that was put under a 25-year D notice, right? D for diarrhea.
Ha 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 ha. Okay, well, it just reminds me of our political parties supposedly under a D notice for talking about military unification. But the ironic thing is that 2 years ago, UKIP did a press conference on this, and they covered military unification. So why they would do a D-notice 2 years later seems a little bit extraordinary. Do you know what I mean? Maybe people have slept since then and forgotten what actually happened 2 years ago.
Well, yes, they do fall asleep, and the chemtrails help them fall asleep, and the BBC is all about the tonation of making people not think and accept whatever's said. So if you look at Brussels as being a giant pedophile movement, and they are invoking all these made-up EU treaties, absolutely in line for pedophiles, so that if anyone protests or riots, they are allowed to be executed. So under the EU rules, which the UK has signed, which Parliament signed, if anyone protests or riots, they can be killed with impunity.
Is that in the Lisbon Treaty?
That's in there. That's just blatant execution. It's in there. It's absolutely.
So by bringing people together into London and potentially inciting violence, that could be the worst thing possible for those people. So, right, Greg, will you come back on again?
Sure. Yeah,
so part 7.
What's that?
We can do part 7.
It's not really toilet humor. It's actually part of hidden history. You know?
Oh, I wouldn't want to see it, that's for sure.
I wouldn't want to see it, but, you know, she still had white gloves on, but, you know, Prince Philip wasn't too happy.
Kissing cousins. Right, on that note, wow, we've been on the air just about an hour. So, Greg, thank you so much. It's the end of part 6. Caroline Stevens, Seeking the Truth with Greg Hallett. And I'll see you again soon. We'll do a part 7.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And good night to everybody at home. It's Caroline Stevens, Seeking the Truth. And you can find it on YouTube. Bye for now.